We do this live on Zoom. So I do have multiple points of channels here, and unfortunately, I know sometimes, so the Zoom one gets recorded. It's just the easiest and most affordable. As we move forward with not only with this, but through our studios, we will get more cameras, just so it's more practical. Because I know when you're engaging on this, from the workshop's point of view, and you would always like the presenter to look you in the eye, and it's not always that easy because on the central spot here it's LinkedIn, and it's obviously the notes are here as well. So to present to you guys, it's almost always eye contact, and to present, for example, to the camera over there, which is connected to the Zoom account. So a lot of times you don't get the best angles or my eye contact. So I do apologize for that in advance. So yeah, welcome to Wisdom. Welcome to week 3 of Wisdom. Week 1, we spoke about diligence. I chose diligence as week 1 because with any business I do, and any executives I coach at the end of the day, the same theme I put out from the start is, if you cannot strive for excellence, if that's not your main goal, if to just be diligent and excellent in what you do, to take on the tasks diligently, the best advice I can give you is to rather skip out on that opportunity, right? Because opportunity comes knocking everywhere, and sometimes we just want to grab everything. And if we can't be diligent to see the process through, at one point it is going to give you some trouble. That's a theme that Solomon warns us, and we see it in businesses. We see it when they drop the ball, and it's not always immediately. Sometimes they do, follow through, but then there's the stress, then there's the burden, then there's the family, issues, then there's bankruptcy later on, or whatever. It's such a major task on their hands, and it's why, because they couldn't approach it diligently from the get-go. That's a major theme, and that's the skill set I believe that I see that from an entrepreneur's point of view we need in the business world. We need to apply that skill set in the wisdom that we gain, in the knowledge that we gain. We need to apply and approach that diligently with a skill set of diligence. So that's why we chose that for week 1. Week 2 was communication. That was the next theme that we spoke about, reminding us that we need to be able to learn, to listen, and have a conversation at the end of the day. To notice the difference between emotional, the practical and social conversations that one have, and the ability to steward and guide a conversation quite accordingly, right? So those were the first 2 weeks. So if you miss anything, as I said, on our socials, you can check for my personal one or ExCAP, go to the links in our bios, the usual ones. But here's the thing, short clips of our off the cuff get shared on Instagram. Anything live with Wisdom at this moment, we're not resharing moments or clips or anything. We're doing this live. The full live recording is going on to YouTube. So if we've got problems recording anything live, unfortunately, it won't be there, because I'm trusting only on Zoom with that. And we have had issues with that in the past, but we'll sort out that infrastructure. And then obviously, from the YouTube, we send if there's needed resources to apply to that. So if you get the resources, for example, and you haven't watched the episode, it won't entirely make sense. And if you watch the episode and there's reference to something that will be sent, if you're not on that resources, that's why it accompanies. It's a short newsletter. We try to keep it short. Don't spam me every day. Ideally, we'll get it out on the Tuesday, same day, but sometimes, depending on how my day also looks like, we'll do that on the Wednesday. So that's where you can find everything. If you've signed up, I've mentioned it earlier, but I made a note here. If you signed up for Wisdom via our forms, meaning you on our CRM database, to get the notifications, but you miss coming to the live segments of this, what's going to happen in our database now, after 3 weeks, it's going to cut you off of that database, meaning you won't get the resources list. Don't worry, don't need to resubscribe, because it's not a subscription that you can unsubscribe from a newsletter point of view. And because we are not rendering a service to you or a knowledge base, we cannot legally keep your data on our database and keep communicating with you on that, because you need to be able to obviously opt out, like you see with any marketing content with that. And the way the funnel is created for this purpose is we don't allow subscribers that's not part of Wisdom, so we're not going to keep your data there. So if you're watching the recording, and you've always received the accompanied resources and now you're not going to get it, just reach out to us manually, email us, and we'll forward it manually to you, and we'll do that. We are creating a newsletter database after this series to funnel everything in a knowledge base afterwards, so just keep an eye out on this. So yeah, and that brings us to our next topic. And our next topic, our topic that's going to be today, is to be open to correction or to reproach. Let me just drink some of my water here. Apologies, we are live and I am thirsty in the mornings. Let's go. So let's be honest, the worst advice to receive is most probably the advice to be able to be wrong. No one likes when people tell you, listen here, I'm going to give you some advice. Here's advice: is you need to be able to be wrong. All right. So that's definitely not a fun way to start any morning or anything like that. So it's the same advice that is the pinnacle for marriage advice. It's the advice we lecture to our kids. And whenever we want to be right, we kind of like enforce this rule on our, whoever we're having a conversation with, just to tell them that they need to accept to be wrong. So we love giving this advice. We just hate receiving it at the end of the day. So plus, honestly, I think it's one of the worst business advice that's ever been given. It was a massive trend and a massive, I would say trend in the 80s. And we got it from the 80s, and it just moved on from there. The advice that the customer is always right. I think the heart behind it was servitude. But I think naturally in the 80s, 90s, and even early 2000s, people naturally spent time with clients. So the relational servitude was naturally valid and applicable and there in, the day-to-day. But later on, that became the trend of we're not relationally connected, so the client should be in the position to always be right. And I think that's some of the worst business advice that you can ever get. Last year, even, I did a massive podcast on the ability to fire clients that don't align with your culture. And even this week, we've got the in-laws here with us, blessed with that, this visit. And we had a pool chat just in our pool here about the poisonous entitlement that creeps into workplaces, that's coming from this place of that person is always right, the client is always right, the entitlement is always right, and it can really be poisonous. It's definitely not a great place to be in. But however, this is not exactly that topic. This is the topic of we actually need to be open to correction and reproach. Solomon teaches that to us, but not only from a biblical or brother or point of view, but from a relational point of view with our customers, with our team members, with the ones that we're accountable with ourselves, and then obviously with one another in the church environment and setting. So it really goes into, it's a practical thing that Solomon says, I'm not only speaking to you, I'm not only speaking to that, I'm speaking to the entirety thereof. It's valid for the entirety thereof. And that's the topic of the day. And I've motivated this before, that Solomon's wisdom was not only powerful way back then, it's powerful, even more so valid today and more powerful today than ever before. I've seen it in businesses. So I'm very privileged. I haven't shared this publicly, waiting for, all the artwork and things like that. But I'm very privileged to have been invited to speak and actually to do a lecture workshop next week, actually, at the Global Youth Sustainable Development and Leadership Summit. And in preparation for the summit, which is obviously on a global, it's virtual, I'm not flying out anywhere, fortunately, but it's a global, I'm very excited for that. But in preparation for that, I'm reaching out to a lot of CEOs and mentors within various industries just to get their knowledge on certain topics that I want to present, and then obviously looking at people that's been to this summit to just gain their wisdom and everything like that. And the reason I reach out to this is a topic that we'll actually discuss, I think, in 2 weeks' time. We're talking about the mentorship or having counsel. Solomon speaks about that counsel quite a lot. We see it, businesses succeed because of the counsel, and ideas that fail because of the lack of their counsel. But the point that I want to make is I'm seeing my statement that I made on the validity of Solomon's wisdom, that it's so much more true today. I see that in their businesses. If Solomon's wisdom and God's blueprint is valid and active, it's always a success. The success scale is just measured differently, but it's always impactful, always successful, and even more today. And yeah, so it reaps rewards to build a business on this wisdom. And actually, when I speak to these type of peoples and my clients as well, and see it in the day to day, is the converse is also true. When this lacks, when Solomon's advice lacks in a business, converse is also true. And unfortunately, businesses fail. Not always overnight, but we see that. You can go with any single business that failed. You can go and study, and you can see the trend line, and it's always the converse, the lack of the wisdom. And the ones that succeed, whether they believe or not, most probably always contains that wisdom. It's very interesting. So whenever you read up on businesses for success and failures over the years, go check that. When you see entrepreneurs are burning out, their advice is burning out, everything, they go through these phases where they're just seeking for this purpose, you'll see that exactly. Okay, so in the book of Proverbs, since it's so valid still today, being open to correction, I love this. Rebuke or reproof is a foundational theme. The theme appears in approximately, I've quickly counted, 25 specific proverbs. That's 25 that directly address the need for a teachable heart. That's 25 out of 31. It's almost as if Solomon is saying, if you miss anything else, this is the one not to get wrong. Obviously, just saying that from a probability point of view, it was definitely not Solomon's words, but that's how core or important the core of this theme was, the ability for the heart to be open to rebuke, to correction, to be teachable, to be humble. That was the theme of that. So this theme is central to the book's purpose. It's central to the book's purpose to, of imparting wisdom with numerous verses emphasizing that embracing correction leads to wisdom, while rejecting it is the mark of the fool. So a couple of main themes regarding correction that you can find would be, made some notes here, the mark of the wise versus a fool. This is, of course, a primary theme. Definitely a primary theme is that a wise person loves and seeks correction, while a fool, or depending on the translation, you'd say mocker, or there's different words that they use, hates and rejects it. Proverbs 9 verse 8 to 9, Proverbs 12 verse 1 talks about this. Another main theme would be correction as a path to life. Receiving rebuke is depicted as a life-giving act that leads to growth and keeps one from ruin. We see that in Proverbs 10 verse 17, Proverbs 15 verse 31. Another theme is the danger of refusal. Repeated warnings are given that ignoring correction brings poverty. It brings shame and keeps one from ruin. Keeps one leads one towards destruction, rather, I would say. Then there's a correction as a sign of love. Rather than being seen as punishment, correction is portrayed as a form of loving, parental discipline that guides one to maturity. The closing statement is going to be from the angle of a father speaking to his son, but how we can apply and learn that in our business. So this is the important thing of this wisdom series, is for me to see or to read Proverbs, because that at the end of the day is the goal, right? Is for you as founders, entrepreneurs, business professional, is to read a proverb every single day. There's 31 proverbs, so one per day, and then the last day you can read a couple more. So you either caught up now, or you at number 17 for today, or whenever you started, but try to match it up with your calendar. That's the habit. In a couple of weeks, we're talking about habit formation, how to apply all these habits in your daily life. And that's the tip I want to give, is apply that with your calendar, and then work will get you the skill set on how to work that in. But the purpose of wisdom is to obviously encourage you and inspire you to read your Proverbs, your scripture and your other books as well, but especially Proverbs, to audit, to apply, to let it simmer in, right? In the beginning, it's gonna, I wish I actually should have had my Bible here now, it's on the table, but in the beginning, it's gonna be reading, marking, and not always understanding, or understanding, there's funny things in there as well. But as you do it every single month, because naturally, if you think about it, you're going to read Proverbs, the book of Proverbs, 12 times, or if you started only now in, let's say, 10 to 11 times this year, that's 10 to 11 times that you're going to read it, and you're going to continue that for the rest of your life. It's going to be so part of it. But with any business, you're going to learn the skills, so you're going to apply it. You're going to, let it simmer in, and it's going to keep you accountable in your business. Now, for me, I'm not here to teach you that, because you need to let the Holy Spirit speak to you in that moment, and through that. For me, it is, I want to bring what I see, the wisdom that works in the practical field. Well, all of them work. That's the point that I want to make. But that I experience, I want to take that themes and I want to bring it here to kind of teach you the skill to interpret it and dissect it and implement it on your own accord. So my point of view is not the lecture, it's just how I look at things from a consultant point of view. And for 30 minutes a week, it's just to motivate you as such. So take it for yourself. If you're new here, so welcome. And yeah, just thank you for being here. This is one of my highlights for the week. The last theme regarding correction that I found from Proverbs was obviously the value of friendliness. It's to be open. Honest rebuke is framed as better than concealed or false love. That's from Proverbs 27 verse 5 to 6 that I got that from. And then there's a couple of favorites. Let's be honest. There's always a couple of favorite verses, and these are my favorite key verses on openness to correction that I take from Solomon's book of Proverbs, that I try to let it just simmer in my heart and apply where I can. And if I don't apply it, it really comes to, I won't say haunt me, but convict me at the end of the day. So there's several key verses that I highlighted, on the importance of accepting correction to gain wisdom is Proverbs 12 verse 1 and 15 verse 32. Those two talks about, it emphasizes that loving discipline is synonymous with loving knowledge and understanding. We know that, we know those famous verses, we know the trend or the meaning behind it, that it always says, if you're open to love correction, you love knowledge. And that is so true. Proverbs 9 verse 8 to 9 speaks, notes that rebuking a wise person increases their wisdom, whereas a mocker will hate you for it. So it tells you on the receiving end of the line, on the converse, which one are you? Proverbs 13 verse 18 talks about connects ignoring correction to poverty and shame, while accepting it brings honor. And Proverbs 25 verse 12 describes a wise rebuke to a listening ear as a valuable jewelry. Furthermore, the book warns that persistent stubbornness against correction leads to irreparable ruin. Proverbs 29 verse 1, I made a note there, speaks about it a lot. And that's where we pick up the business angle, I would say. This for me, and I'll insert the diagram in the resources that I sent, but this is the cycle of reproach from a business point of view. It's to hear, if you follow the circle, it's to hear, to evaluate, to humble, and to apply, right? That's how we use reproach, how we use feedback, open to correction, is we hear it, we evaluate it, we humble ourselves, and we apply it. When this is done from this point of view, it allows you to submit and be open to reproach from and for the right circumstances. So here is to listen, not to give your opinion, with the ability and willingness to actually take action. Evaluate where this is coming from. What is it addressing? Is it breaking down walls for God to actually build up? Is the valid from growth also? Would it hurt to be wrong in this moment? And then there's the humility, the humble part. We need to be able to be wrong. Not with the mindset going into a conversation to be wrong, but we need to be able to be wrong. Now, humility and modesty. If you've known me, we've had this conversation most probably before. In one of my oldest podcasts and trainings on confidence, I speak about, when you are confident, you don't want to be arrogant, you want to be humble actually, but humble and modesty are not the same. They both might be opposites of arrogance, but they're not synonymous with one another, because the one, modesty, is deceitful. It's lying. It's like, oh, I'm not fast, and then clearly you are. It's taking that glory away and basing it on a lie. Whereas humility is accepting a compliment where it comes from, accepting the truth where it comes from, and just taking that glorification, that honor, and not giving praise to yourself, but giving it to your Creator that created you. That's from a point of being humble. It's not about yourself, it's about God. Whereas modesty is deceitful. It's not about anyone. It's, just I'm going to be modest and lie about something that's obviously not the truth. So be careful to not be entrapped on. If you want to have a discussion further, we can. But I'm checking my clock there, and we've got 5 minutes left. We'll respect that. So we need to be able to be wrong. And then actually, you need to go and apply the reproach that you get or give. Is there needs to be actually taken action, right? So just going to re-mention that frame, and the frame is, or that circle is, when it comes to reproach, when it comes to feedback, when it comes to open to correction, we need to be able to hear, to evaluate, to humble ourselves, and actually apply it. Reproach is about being in the position of accepting, okay? Accepting correction, accepting the teaching, accepting the feedback, and accepting the knowledge. And as we move on with wisdom, we're going to talk about these themes of, well, knowledge is the main thing, I guess, but the feedback and teaching. Where do you get your feedback from? When I work with executives, I always say to people, you need to have counsel, you need to get feedback from people, but always understand where the feedback comes from. Even with us, when we do an introduction on proposals or services, we give a background of who we are, not because we want to boast in anything. On the contrary, we just want to tell people, my thought comes from this point of view. So with wisdom, my thought comes from Proverbs applied to the business point of view. And then you can go further. So you can take this feedback and apply to the applicability point of view, where you see that is valid. And that's why we get that, that feedback. It's very important to understand the feedback. You can get financial advice from someone that is allowed to and in the position to give you financial advice. Same with legal, everything else. So don't take the same feedback from the same person on everything. It just doesn't work, right? So in essence, if we are accepting the correction, the teaching, the feedback, and the knowledge, in essence, reproach, being open to correction, is accepting Proverbs. That's the conclusion of that. But being constantly open to reproach, where does our role come in as the giver of reproach? Surely it's not always to accept it, right? We don't always want to know if we're wrong. We sometimes need to be in the position to actually give it. We always want to be in that position. So that's why I started with the other side first. But of course not. We need to be able to give, reproach and correction. Being in the position of giving is equal to having the wisdom to gain diligence with what is our attentions through this, or intentions rather, through this. Our giving part should always be via the heart. Being slow to speak, but remember, being slow to speak is not equal to being silent. It's not equal to, saying nothing at all. When you read Proverbs, you will notice that almost always when talking about correction, it will be mentioned in the form of a father to their kids. Words like, my son, be open to correction. And this is what I find very interesting. God never addresses us as his adults. When he speaks to us as adults, it's subject to our position in our own life, subject to the secular position, and directly in association with our earthly life, right? So, but in the possessive form, always we are his children. And when he addresses us from a point of children of God, a reminder that the reproaches and correction is for our best interest. So Proverbs 22 verse 6 states that train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he would not depart from it. This widely cited verse serves as a guiding principle for parents to provide early, consistent, and godly instruction, with a promise that foundational moral teachings will endure throughout a child's life. But it's also valid in our team management, in our client management, and for yourself. And this is the mandate. The mandate is to train up. This implies that you need to be dedicated to teaching, correction, and directing. For you, for your kids, it's their spiritual path, right? So, but it's a mandate for your team and clients as well. Because are you praying for them? Are you training them? Are you caring for their well-being? And even from a superficial or surface point of view, are you training your clients and your team members on your values, on your product knowledge, new insights, and diligent information available to you? Or are you deliberately withholding that? And actually for what reason? And then the last 3 points is, it's the promise and principle. This verse suggests that early spiritual and moral training builds a lasting foundation. Even if a child temporarily wanders, the principle instilled in youth tend to bring them back later in life, right? We saw that theme in the Bible as well. Are you offering this type of training with your clients, with your kids, your teams, that impacts a morality worth coming back to? Like, is your company moral, your team morals worth coming back to at the end of the day? You need to keep yourself accountable for that. Or is it just enough for them to get by through the service that they're experiencing? It comes back to that 1% excellence. And that's the question, I guess, at the end of the day. And then the context. The context is, it is one of many wisdom sayings in Proverbs, focusing on practical life, upbringing, and the long-term impact of early guidance. And because of that, I feel it's valid for every part of an entrepreneur's journey, with your life, with your kids, your team, your calling, your goals, your dreams, your clients, your business, everything. So here's a closing thought. When we think about applying reproach, number one, let's focus on the problem and not the profit. And I'm not talking about the profit, the prophetic, I'm talking about the profit you make from money. Be obsessed with the solution always, not the offer that fixes the solution, right? So when we're fixed on solving, we are way more open to reproach and correction from anyone and give it way more structurally. Correction and reproach should be truthful, and it should be within the ability to listen and the ability to address issues. Correction, it should always be to build up character and never to break character down. So address the issue and not the person. So next week, we're going to have our Q&As. So instead of making it messy, I'm going to send with the resources a link. So as you journaled through everything, I want you to think within diligence and communication, reproach, and of course, you're allowed to think and be inspired generally by wisdom and Proverbs. So I'll send out a link to capture your questions with the resources, but I want you to think just in this line. Do you have any general questions around the theory that we discussed? Are there any specific assistance you need around, the practical application thereof? Is there something you disagree with and feel to share or discuss? Any other ideally relevant questions regarding your team or company and clients? Do you have a testimony from all of this, or where do you need help on applying anything that you've learned? Okay, so that's it from today. I'll send that with the resources. Please let that simmer in. If you've got any questions now, you can put them in the comments. But for the rest of you, have a beautiful day. And thank you for being here. And on the Q&A, everyone's welcome to join in. You're going to have the option to keep it, silent, anonymous, whatever, and take advantage from free consultancy. Otherwise, you get a hefty bill. This is completely for free. And I'll see you there. Thanks for being here.